My sister gave a wedding speech thanking the only real parents she ever had, my mom and dad. When I questioned them, they said she needed it more. I smiled. What I did next made their perfect image crumble on Facebook Live. I'm Helena, I've lived in Schenectady, New York my whole life. It's the kind of town where you run into your 4th grade math teacher in line at the post office and everyone knows who just sold their house before the for sale sign goes up. People don't forget things here, but they also don't say much. Everything happens under polite smiles and casseroles. My parents, Rhonda and Terry, are local fixtures. Mom was an English teacher at Schenectady High School for 30 years, Dad ran his own real estate business. If there were a town hall of beloved families, ours would have been printed on the brochure. We were the kind of family that sent out annual holiday letters with little updates about our lives. Always smiling. Always doing well. Then there's my sister, Isla. She was adopted when I was 3. She was a chubby, solemn baby with dark curly hair and these huge eyes that made everyone melt. My parents always framed her adoption as this beautiful, almost spiritual event. She was meant for us, they'd say. She completed our family. Growing up, I didn't question it. I loved her. I protected her. I walked her home from school, helped her with math homework, consoled her when she was picked last in the gym. I was the big sister. It was simple. At least, I thought it was. As we grew older, things started shifting. Isla was moodier, more sensitive, and more prone to retreating inward when things didn't go her way. Where I coped by doing more, studying harder, helping more, staying out of trouble, Isla shut down. She went through hobbies like tissues. One year it was gymnastics. Then violin. Then painting. Then photography. Each time, she declared it would be her thing, and each time, she dropped it when it got hard. Still, Mom and Dad showered her with praise. You're so creative, they'd gush. So talented. You just need to find the right outlet. I'd watch from across the dinner table while clearing the dishes. I graduated early, became a nurse, and stayed local. I bought a modest 2-bedroom ranch just outside town. Paid it off slowly. I visited my parents every Sunday. I kept everything in my life in order. Isla moved to Brooklyn at 20 and cut off contact for a while. She resurfaced occasionally, usually when she needed something, money, advice, or to vent about an awful roommate or job. I was always the one who responded. Mom would sigh and say, she's still finding her way. But when Isla came home at 33, freshly engaged to Javier, a Spanish filmmaker who looked like he belonged on the cover of GQ, suddenly the prodigal daughter became the family's crown jewel. They planned a wedding near Lake George, an expensive lakeside venue my parents offered to pay for as a gift. I wasn't consulted about the budget. I was invited, barely. I wasn't at the wedding party. Just a guest. A guest at my own sister's wedding. I should have known that day would go sideways. The ceremony was stunning. Trees lined the venue in golden October leaves. Candles floated on water bowls. Javier beamed. Isla looked radiant, of course. People cried. Then came dinner. Then dessert. Then speeches. Isla stood up with the microphone and smiled, her voice already tight with emotion. To the only real parents I've ever had, Mom and Dad. You gave me everything. You saw me when no one else did. You've been my everything. Applause. Wiping tears. Some people stood to clap. I sat frozen, the fork suspended in my hand. The only real parents she's ever had. And what was I? The neighbor's kid? I excused myself and walked outside into the chilly night air, my stomach in knots. My head was ringing. I kept asking myself, why would she say that? Why would they let her? I found Mom near the patio heaters. She was sipping wine, glowing. Why didn't you stop her? I asked, keeping my voice steady. What do you mean? She asked, smiling like she didn't understand. That speech, I said. She erased me. And you let her. She sighed. Not sad. Just tired. Like I was being difficult. Helena, she needed that moment. More than you. That was it. She needed it more. As if love was a limited resource, and I'd had my fill. As if my lifelong patience, quiet support, and sacrifices were expected, while Isla's were to be rewarded. I smiled. Tight. Numb. I went back in and clapped along with the rest of them. But inside me, something flipped. And that was the moment I stopped being the quiet daughter. I didn't explode. I didn't scream or make a scene. No, I did what I've always done, I planned. The next few months were quiet on the surface. Isla and Javier went on their honeymoon. My parents stayed busy organizing wedding photos and hosting brunches for extended family. On Facebook, Mom posted endless slideshows, a perfect day for our perfect girl. So blessed to be her parents. My name wasn't in a single caption. I started going through family albums, digital ones. My face faded from recent years. There were no photos of me at birthdays, holidays. At some point, I had been cropped out, literally and figuratively. Then came the final push. I stumbled on Isla's birth records. I had reached out to Albany County's clerk office under the pretense of building a family tree. I was surprised at how quickly I got the documents. Isla had not been adopted at birth, as they claimed. She had been born in Utica, placed into foster care for nearly a year, and entered our family at 2. They had rewritten history. My parents had edited their story, and hers, until it fit their preferred narrative. We saved her. She made us a family. It was easier to be a hero that way. They never told Isla the truth. Or maybe they did. Or maybe they told her something even more warped, something that made her feel like I didn't exist in that equation at all. But I wasn't angry at Isla. I was furious at them. The people who raised me. Who told me that love was a duty, while lavishing Isla with visible affection and praise. Who made me invisible unless they needed help moving furniture or setting up Wi-Fi. So when they asked me to help them with a Facebook livestream for a wedding recap brunch, I said yes. They had no idea what I had planned. So there I was, standing in my parents' kitchen 2 hours before the brunch. Mom was busy arranging a fruit platter. Dad, wearing his usual checkered vest and smug pride, was pacing the living room rehearsing what he was going to say during the livestream. They had practiced their little speech. It started with how proud they were to have hosted such a meaningful wedding. It ended with a familiar refrain, "We've been so blessed to be Isla's parents." They had written me out of the story completely. "We'll go live at noon," Mom said. "Helena, you're still good with setting it up for us?" I smiled and nodded. Of course. I set up their iPad on a tripod in the living room, just in front of the big mantel where decades of polished family portraits hung. The camera would catch the whole thing, the tasteful decor, the string lights, and the smugness. But what they didn't know was that I had switched their streaming platform. Instead of setting it to stream on their Facebook account, I connected it to mine, a public profile I rarely used. The live stream would look the same to them, but the audience would be very different. I made sure to tag people. Not just extended family, but their old colleagues, their retirement friends, even former neighbors. If you've ever wondered how fast a fire spreads, let me tell you, it's faster than guilt. At 12 p.m. sharp, the stream went live. They sat down, all smiles. A fresh bouquet of lilies rested on the coffee table. Dad wore a tie, Mom wore pearls. "Hello, everyone." Dad beamed. "We wanted to share a few thoughts on this special journey." I stood off camera with my phone, watching as the viewer count ticked up. Dozens. Then hundreds. More than either of them could ever pull in on their own. They talked for 10 minutes. About the journey of parenthood. About the miracle of finding Isla. About how they always knew she was meant to be theirs. I let them finish. I let them marinate in their self-congratulation. Then I walked into frame, very calmly, and sat down between them. "Oh," Mom said, startled. "Helena, you want to say a few words?" "I do," I said. "I think I've earned that much." They looked confused, but the camera was still rolling. I looked straight at the lens and said, "Hi, everyone. Helena here. Some of you know me as Rhonda and Terry's other daughter. The one you haven't seen in any of their recent family posts. The one who wasn't thanked at the wedding. The one who didn't exist in their speech." My mother's hand went to her chest. Dad tried to wave it off. "Let's not, I'm not here to argue," I said, eyes locked on the lens. "I just want to tell the truth. Since that seems to have been optional in our family." Then I told them everything. About Isla's actual adoption timeline. About her early foster care. About the official records that painted a very different story from the one they'd peddled for decades. I found the documents, I said. She wasn't adopted as a newborn. She was placed with us at 2, after a year in the foster system. That's not shameful. But pretending otherwise? That's manipulation. Mom's voice was tight. Helena, this isn't the time, no? I asked, turning to her. You said she needed that speech more than I did. You said she needed it. When did I stop being a daughter and start being a shadow? There was a pause. The kind that stretches a second into a century. I turned back to the camera. If you've ever wondered what it feels like to be slowly erased from your own family story, you're looking at it. Dad finally stood, walking toward the camera to shut it off. We're done here, he muttered. But it was too late. Hundreds of people had watched. The damage wasn't done in volume. It was done in truth. The fallout was immediate, though not loud. My parents didn't call me after that. They didn't call me at all. For days, their silence was louder than anything I'd ever heard from them. But I did hear from others. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years reached out with quiet solidarity. An old teacher emailed me to say she'd always thought something was off in how I was treated. Even Isla's childhood friend messaged, I always wondered why you were never in the photos. And then came the message I didn't expect. From Isla. It wasn't long. Just an email with the subject line, we should talk. No accusations. No anger. Just that. I stared at it for almost a full day before replying. I didn't reply to Isla's email right away. I wanted to. But a part of me, the part that had sat at countless family dinners where my voice felt optional, where I was seen but not acknowledged, wasn't ready. I knew I needed to be calm. Centered. This wasn't a conversation I wanted to have from a place of pain. So I waited 3 days. Then I replied with 3 words, I think so. She called the next afternoon. Her voice was quieter than I remembered. Less sharp, more cautious. We hadn't talked on the phone in nearly a year. Her tone didn't have that sparkly performance edge it usually carried. It was raw. Hi, she said, just barely above a whisper. Hi. And just like that, the silence between us turned into a breathing thing. A third person in the room, lurking between every pause. She spoke first. I saw the video. I waited. I didn't know, she said after a long pause. I didn't know about the foster stuff. Or Utica. Or any of it. I could tell she wasn't lying. Her voice was too soft, too stunned. I thought you did, I said honestly. For a long time, I thought you knew and just didn't care. No, she said quickly. I would have cared. I do care. There was another silence. This one is different. Heavier. They told me I was born in Albany. That the minute they saw me, they knew. That it was love at first sight. She laughed bitterly. They said they fought to adopt me. That it took months of legal battles. That's what I believed. I swallowed. I used to think you hated me, she added. When we were growing up. That you resented me. I never hated you, I said. I hated how small I had to become for you to be visible. That landed hard. I could hear her breathing through it. They made me feel like I was the special one, she admitted. But sometimes it felt fake. Like they were trying to fill some hole I didn't understand. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. She was starting to unravel what I'd known for years. I remember once, she continued, when I was maybe 12, Mom snapped at me for breaking something. You came in and took the blame. She didn't even question it. I didn't understand then, but I do now. They needed me to be invisible, I said. So you could be everything they imagined. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I believed her. We didn't solve everything on that call. But something thawed. Something that had been frozen between us since we were teenagers. Not trust, exactly. But curiosity. And maybe a little grace. A week later, we met up at a coffee shop halfway between her place in Brooklyn and mine in Albany. Little Collins on Lexington and 44th. She looked older than I remembered. Tired. But grounded. We talked for 3 hours. She asked questions she'd never asked before. I answered honestly. No bitterness. Just facts. When I told her about how they'd slowly edited me out of the story, how they'd replaced presence with performance, she nodded. It's like they needed to believe they saved someone, she said. So they built a version of me that made that true. And a version of me that didn't need saving, I added. Exactly. At some point, we fell into a comfortable rhythm. For the first time in maybe 20 years, we weren't competing for the air in the room. We were two women, sisters, raised under a carefully painted lie, and starting to name it together. We agreed not to confront our parents together. Not yet. Isla needed time to process. And I needed space from them. From the house I grew up in. From the eyes that looked through me more often than at me. Meanwhile, back in Schenectady, the fallout had taken on a life of its own. People noticed the video. A few of our old family friends even reshared it, though not out of malice. Out of something closer to awe. One comment stayed with me: I never knew Helena had that much to say. Funny, isn't it? That being quiet for so long can convince people you have nothing to say, when in reality, your silence was screaming. My mother deactivated her Facebook. My father quietly stopped attending the Rotary Club meetings. Word got around. Not that they were abusive or cruel, but that their story wasn't quite what it seemed. It was enough to fracture the image they'd worked so hard to build. Enough to make them uncomfortable at dinner parties. Enough to make them aware of their reflection. They didn't reach out to me. Not once. No phone call. No message. Not even a half-hearted attempt to explain. That silence was different from Isla's. Hers was stunned. Wounded. Theirs was pride. Wounded pride has no curiosity. It only retreats. And I let them. It was mid-December when I finally visited the house again. Not to reconcile. Not even to confront. Just to collect the last of my things. The neighborhood looked the same. Lights strung over old porches. Wreaths hanging crookedly. Familiar in that suffocating way. The driveway still had the oil stain where I crashed my first car into the garage. Mom was in the kitchen when I walked in. She looked up like she'd seen a ghost. Then, just like that, I went back to stirring something on the stove. I went upstairs without a word. Packed 2 boxes of books, some old yearbooks, a few photos they hadn't remembered to crop. I was halfway down the stairs when she finally spoke. You embarrassed us. I stopped. I told the truth, I said calmly. You didn't have to do it like that. I tried doing it your way, I said. For 30 years. She turned around, her face full of quiet fury. Do you think we loved you less? No, I said. You just loved being heroes more. She didn't answer. I walked out. This isn't over yet. There are still wounds to sort through, conversations left hanging in the cold December air. But something inside me has shifted. For the first time in decades, I'm not carrying someone else's story. I'm writing my own. And maybe, just maybe, so is Isla. It had been almost 4 months since the Facebook livestream. At that time, Isla and I kept talking. Not every day, but enough. She was back in New York after a stint in Madrid, and we began meeting more regularly, always somewhere neutral, like Bryant Park or Chelsea Market. Places that didn't hold our family's fingerprints. We didn't try to be best friends. That would have been dishonest. But we were rebuilding something real, grounded in shared truths instead of polished performances. And I could see her starting to change, too. The constant need to be enough, the instinct to perform for praise, it was fading. Slowly, but noticeably. Meanwhile, my parents stayed silent. No apology. No message. Not a single question about the truth I had publicly aired. They had retreated into their carefully curated shame. I could almost picture them sitting at the dinner table, blaming everyone but themselves. That same table where I used to do homework while Isla practiced her recital pieces, and they sipped wine, smiling like we were in a Hallmark movie. I should have let it go there. I had made my point. But something kept scratching at me. Not anger. Not bitterness. Something else, closure. Not the kind where someone says sorry and you all cry and hug. But the kind where the scale finally feels even. Where silence isn't victory, and walking away isn't surrender. And then, fate handed me the perfect opening. The school where my mother taught for 30 years, Schenectady High, announced they were creating a digital community archive. Former students, teachers, and staff could contribute photos, anecdotes, and video submissions for a big anniversary event. It would be shown publicly at a spring fundraiser. There would be a public website, media coverage, and even a small reception. I read the announcement 3 times. Then I called Isla. I have an idea, I told her. By then, Isla had already requested her own records from Albany and had started therapy. She knew everything. More importantly, she was ready. We made the video together. It wasn't angry. It wasn't accusatory. It was honest. We sat side by side, unscripted, and told the real story. Isla explained how it felt to grow up being praised as a miracle, a rescue, how isolating that was. How it warped her sense of self. I talked about what it was like being the strong one by default. The quiet one. The expected one. How being reliable turned into being invisible. How I was never told I mattered, because I never gave anyone a reason to worry. We ended it simply, Isla saying, no child should be loved because they complete a story. They should be loved because they exist. And me, saying, it's never too late to tell the truth. Even when the story's already been told. We submitted it anonymously. No names. No identifiers. But our faces were on screen. The school accepted it. The night of the fundraiser, our video played last. I didn't attend in person. Neither did Isla. But we watched the live stream. We saw our parents sitting at a table near the front, Mom in a pale blue blazer, Dad with his old Rotary Club pin still on his lapel. They looked like they always did in public, put together, comfortable, admired. Then the video started. I watched as my mother's hand slowly fell from her glass. My father shifted in his seat. At first, the crowd was silent. Then some murmuring. A few shocked expressions. And finally, scattered applause. Nothing loud. But the kind of applause that means something landed. The kind that lingers. Our parents sat frozen, watching the truth unspool from a screen they couldn't mute. By the time it ended, most of the audience was staring at them. They left before dessert. A few days later, I got a card in the mail. No envelope. Just a small white note card with 6 words, written in my mother's handwriting. We didn't know. We see now. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because this was never about their validation. It was about balance. For the first time in my life, I wasn't edited out. I wasn't in the background. I was visible. Isla and I still talk. We're not perfect. We're figuring it out. We laugh sometimes about how our parents tried so hard to be the heroes that they forgot to be humans. Now, we're writing our story, truthfully, messily, fully.